Hello everyone, my name's Scott. Welcome to my channel. It is August. That means here in the Chicago area it's going to be hot and humid all the time, but nevertheless I shall plunge forward with my series, The Decades of Action Challenge, which is me basically taking a movie a week, starting from 1968 and going all the way to the end of the year up to the present day, as per a selected series by Tom Breihan, a writer for avclub.com, who is highlighting and writing about what he considers the most important action movie of each year, starting with Steve McQueen in Bullitt, and ending up with, as he says, whatever Vin Diesel is doing right this minute. I figured at the beginning of the series, when I started back in January, at that point I think he'd reached 1992, and I figured it was a possibility that he could pick a particular film that I am not a fan of for 1996, and he did. But when I started, I said I'm going to watch them all, even the ones I've already seen and don't like. And this week, of course, Breihan picked, he didn't pick it this week, he picked it last year, but it was The Rock from 96. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't last year. It was earlier this year. Anyway, The Rock is Michael Bay's second feature film after Bad Boys, which I made a video about last week. Oh, and by the way, since I didn't actually get to post this video last week, I'm going to be posting 2 videos this week in order to sort of catch up and be on schedule, which means I'll be doing 1997 on Friday this week. But, as I was saying, Michael Bay directed Bad Boys, then he followed that up with The Rock, and when I saw the listing for it in one of the trade papers, there's a movie called The Rock. It's being made. It's got Ed Harris, Nicolas Cage, Sean Connery in it. I couldn't remember, couldn't place Michael Bay's name, but I thought, hey, that sounds like a good movie. That's a really good cast right there. And it is a good cast. Aside from those 3, you've also got David Morse and William Forsythe. You've got a bunch of good people. John McGinley, Tony Todd. It's a real strong cast of good character actors. The movie was a massive letdown for me, a massive letdown. In fact, I really was irritated by this movie right from the very beginning. I saw it opening weekend. Then actually it was a week or 2 later that a good friend of mine said, hey, me and my brother and some other people were all going to go see The Rock. Are you interested? I'm like, I saw that movie and I don't think you're going to like it too much. But I gave it another shot. I went back to see it twice. I went back to see it a second time just because, I don't know, maybe I was just in the wrong mood for this movie. No, I hated it, and the friend who invited me along with him, he hated it too. And the primary reason for this, aside from some of the stupider things that happen in the movie, but it's mostly the style, Michael Bay's style of filmmaking, and it's changed a bit since then. Michael Bay has made good movies. He made 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, which I feel is his best movie, and it's a good movie. It's a good, straightforward movie. This one, I have huge issues with, and what's really kind of dispiriting for me is recognizing just how many people really like this movie. And compared to the Transformers movies that Michael Bay has directed, he's done 5 of them so far, it is probably a better movie than any of those films, the Transformers movies, but it's still really bad. Saying that it's a better Michael Bay movie is not saying all that much. This movie was produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, who's done the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and prior to this, of course, he did Top Gun and some other tough guy action stuff. He made Tony Scott's career by hiring him first for Top Gun and for Days of Thunder, and then Tony Scott went on to have a great career. And Michael Bay previously had done, as I said in the previous video, television commercials and music videos. So there's this certain aesthetic that he brought to a feature film that really didn't belong here, at least as far as I'm concerned. This very flashy style, the lighting, the moody lighting and smoke, the fact that there's a cut when there don't need to be. There's a particular moment in this movie where there's a helicopter with a bunch of Navy SEALs launching from a base, and you've got this guy in the foreground with the big light-up sticks that's, signaling them. And there's at least 3 shots of this character when there doesn't need to be only even one. There's a scene where the Navy SEALs are emerging from a pool, coming up out of the water with their guns drawn, and there's at least one extra shot of them that doesn't need to be there. And this is a style. I understand that it's a style. But it's stupid. It's just a stupid style. It's excessive. And on top of all the other kind of dumb things that happen in this movie, the style of this movie, the visual style, is really very irritating right from the very start. You've got a montage, basically, of the Ed Harris character, a general, sitting in his room, basically smoking a cigar, and then he gets up and dresses in slow motion and goes to a cemetery to visit, his wife's grave. And this is intercut with other scenes and shots of helicopters and what have you, and it just is so fast and oppressive and like in your face right from the very beginning that it really put me off immediately. And I stayed off throughout the whole movie. And a bunch of years back, I actually sat down with the VHS of this movie. I was so passionate, my hatred for this movie, that I sat down and I wrote basically a list of all the things that I hated about this movie. Every single line that I didn't like, every single shot that I didn't like, every single decision that was made about, during the making of this movie that I thought, that's really stupid. And one of the first things is when Hummel, the general, played by Ed Harris, goes to visit his wife's grave, the headstone actually reads his wife. Like, the director has to point out that the person in the grave is his wife and not his mom or his sister or something like that. Yeah, and there's a bunch more. I've got a whole list here. I'm not going to read them all. I'd like to. I'd like to share every little bit of terrible things that happen in this movie. Let me just give you one more example. One more example is the plot of this movie, of course, has a bunch of United States Marines led by General Hummel taking hostages in Alcatraz. A bunch of tourists touring Alcatraz. They lock them in the cells. They take over the island. And they have stolen a series of rockets from a military weapons base that are loaded with VX poison gas. I don't know if that's a real chemical or not, but it's very, very deadly. And they're threatening to launch it at the city of San Francisco unless they receive $100 million from a secret slush fund, which they can then distribute to the families of soldiers that have died in covert operations. Hummel's whole objective here is to give some sort of compensation to the families of the soldiers that died in military operations that the government can't admit to publicly. And therefore, the families don't receive any benefits. He feels this is totally unacceptable, and he wants it to stop, or at least, give the families of these fallen soldiers something in exchange for their sacrifice. So it's a somewhat noble cause, but it's like crazy. And at one point, Sean Connery in the movie is just like, this is ridiculous. What you're doing here, it's absolutely ridiculous. So what happens is Sean Connery, being a former British spy, he is recruited to lead the SEAL team, the Navy SEAL team, into Alcatraz from the underneath, because he successfully escaped Alcatraz. He doesn't have any identity. They, in addition to all the things that they can't admit to, the U.S. government can't admit that they actually held this guy without trial for 30 years because he stole a bunch of secrets and he wouldn't tell them where he had hidden them. There's a funny little joke about the secrets containing the alien landing at Roswell, which is kind of funny considering that Independence Day came out this exact same summer that this movie came out. But he leads them into the prison from underneath. They swim with their scuba gear underneath, and then he leads them up to this room, and there's like, okay, so now we're at this point in the prison where we have to get underneath this furnace right here. There's a furnace basically with these flame bursts. There's this little crawl space that you can get through, but there's bursts of flame, going back and forth. It's like something out of Galaxy Quest. And Connery's like, I memorized the timing when I escaped. I just hope that it hasn't been changed. I can roll through, stop at just the right moments so they don't get singed, and then I can open up this door from the other side. Now, here's the problem with this situation, is that when Connery escaped from the prison, he was going the other way. He was going out of the prison. And so this door that they can't get through. For some reason, they're all stuck in this room. All the Marines, with all their explosives and their weaponry, everything like this, can't get out of this room because they can't open the door from their side. So Connery's like, I'm going to roll through this space right here and avoid the flame burst and open the door from the other side. But he wouldn't have had to do that if he was escaping the prison. If he was getting out of the prison, he would have just walked out through this doorway that can only be opened from the other side, instead of rolling through the underside of the furnace and avoiding the flame burst. He wouldn't have had to do that, okay? It's like, we're going in this way, but Connery, when he first did this, went out the other way, so he wouldn't have even had to do it in the first place. It makes zero sense. It makes no sense. And the problem with a movie like this is that, I mean, if it's entertaining, if you're involved in it, if it's funny, if it's exciting, then little logical errors like that, you know, you just kind of ignore. Or you don't even notice because you're having so much fun. And nothing about this movie is fun for me, and so I noticed every single one of these little issues that came up. Like, that didn't make sense, that was dumb, that was stupid, you know? In addition to all the style and in-your-face and the fact that so much of this movie, you know, is so terribly shot and edited. There's a scene where Connery and the Nicolas Cage character is a chemical weapons expert. They're running from the Marines. They've been discovered. They're running away from the Marines. They're trying to kill them, and they get in these mining carts. They're like these carts that hang from an overhead track, and they're rolling along down this track, and the Marines are after them and shooting at them. And I couldn't tell what the heck was going on at any time during this movie. I've seen this movie maybe like 5 times now in total, with this most recent being the 5th one. And at no point could I understand exactly where everyone was in relation to each other and what was going on. A lot of people complain about shaky cam. They complain about how choreography and action scenes just is incoherent, and it doesn't lend itself to really understanding exactly where characters are in relation to each other. And a lot of the times, I'm able to figure it out, you know, just sort of instinctively, but in this case it didn't work at all. Also, the chase scene that happens earlier in the movie, Connery basically breaks away from the federal agents that are keeping an eye on him because they want him to lead them to Alcatraz. He basically breaks out of custody, basically, avoids the FBI agents, jumps in a vehicle that's outside this hotel that they're all in, a big Humvee, and drives it away, and then all the feds, they chase after him, and Nicolas Cage, he borrows a yellow Ferrari, and he chases after him, and the camera work is just like up and down, and left, like that, and there's even a close-up, basically, of these characters where the camera's like zooming in and out, while they're talking on their radios to each other, and oh my goodness, it's the worst action scene ever shot ever. I mean, it is the worst. It is the worst thing that I've ever seen as far as an action movie goes. You know, I do this thing at the end of 10 movies where I look at all of them. I choose like my favorite movie and I choose my least favorite movie. I choose my favorite action sequence. There's no favorite action scenes in this movie. There's a least favorite. There's a couple candidates for least favorite, but there's no actual favorite at all. Oh, man. I rewatch this and thinking, am I going to have anything fresh to say about this movie that I haven't already said to every single person that I've talked to about this? There's actually another YouTuber who I had a conversation with a couple of months back about this movie, he really likes the movie, and I hate it, and you know, I don't know how he's going to react to this video if he watches it, but you know, oh my goodness, there is so many terrible things that happen in this movie. There's some good performances. I think Nicolas Cage really helps win everyone over. Because he's the fish out of water, he has no combat experience, and so he's reacting sort of humorous nervousness, basically, I guess you could say. And there's a really funny moment, actually, about midway through the movie where Sean Connery says, you know, I'm out of here, I'm not going to... They're stuck in the prison, they're all by themselves, and Connery just wants to leave without finding the rockets and disabling them. And Nicolas Cage is like, okay, pal, that's how you want to play it? We'll play it that way. FBI, freeze! And he points his gun at him and says, FBI, freeze. Despite the fact that Connery is, of course, well aware, and has been for hours, that, you know, he's an FBI agent. It's just like a really funny moment. And you know, Nicolas Cage is sort of fish out of water, not sure what's happening and not sure how to handle the situation, is good for some humor. And there's a couple other good performances in the movie. I really like William Forsythe as the Fed, who's sort of coaching Nicolas Cage. I like David Morse as Ed Harris's right-hand man. Breihan, when he writes his essay, really sort of singled out Ed Harris as being like, oh, it's a great character, and his motivation's really interesting, and it's a great performance, and I don't know, I mean, Ed Harris has good moments, and he's an actor that I like a lot, but sometimes his speeches are cut to hell, you know, and you can tell that there's whole sections missing because the editing is so poor, and some of the ways that he's shot with huge, massive close-ups on his eye and things like that are just really, really distracting. And there are times when Ed Harris is good in the film, but there are other times when he looks like he's just really, really irritated by all the exposition that he has to deliver, you know. On the Criterion edition of this disc, yes, there is a Criterion edition of this movie. They have some bloopers in which Ed Harris is talking on the phone to the guys in Washington. He keeps messing up, and every time he does, he curses his head off and slams the phone into the table over and over and over again. You know, I hope he got paid very well, because it didn't seem like he had a great time making this movie. Maybe some people did, I don't know. Yeah, it's really disappointing, considering the talent involved. And there was one other thing that I wanted. Oh, yeah. Breihan, I just sort of copy and pasted one of Breihan's comments on this movie from the article. It helped nudge action cinema along in its evolution, turning it into something bigger and slicker and dumber. Yeah, that's a plus. Because of movies like The Rock, there was pretty much it was pretty much impossible to think of action movies as B movies by the mid-90s. They were becoming something else. They were becoming blockbusters. They were becoming blockbusters. In 1996, after Raiders of the Lost Ark, after Die Hard, after Terminator 2, oh, now they're becoming blockbusters? Breihan, what the fuck? Excuse my language. Like I said, I figured he would pick this movie because it was so popular and it's very well liked. But boy, oh boy, does this movie piss me off. That's my video for this week. Or for this movie, I should say. Like I said, I'm going to post another video on Friday. That movie is going to be on Breihan's pick for 1997, which is Face Off. John Woo. John Woo's best American movie. Thank goodness I have an antidote for The Rock. I don't have to think about it or watch this movie ever again. It's my own fault. You know, I'm the one who decided to do this. And I knew that he could probably pick this movie, so I said, well, I'll see it one more time. One more time. Maybe I'll like it more this time. Nope. If you'd like to read Tom Breihan's article on The Rock, the link to that article is below. It's on avclub.com. Also, the link to my playlist, where I've got all the videos I've done for this series, and my Facebook page. If you'd like to visit there, that would be great. I got invited to do a podcast recently, and I don't know when that's going to happen, but when it does, I will let you know about it, so that you can hear me blather on about some other movie that won't be The Rock, hopefully. Hey, why don't we talk about The Rock for an hour? Okay. You don't mind bad language on your podcast, do you? Great. Let's do that then. Thanks again for watching. Appreciate it. I'm going to enjoy making a video on the next one very much, so I hope you'll tune in for that. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.